Hello and welcome back to the Princess Power podcast. For any of you joining us for the first time, this is a monthly podcast looking at all things princess. Whether you've recently kissed a frog or grown out your hair to 12 feet long, this is the podcast for you. If you joined us last month, you'll remember what fun we had talking to Sleeping Beauty and her new prince. Now, I'm not one to air out other people's dirty laundry, but in this episode, one of our guests has a few choice words for Sleeping Beauty and talks more about her own separation from the very same prince. I am, of course, talking about Snow White, well known for her time spent with the Seven Dwarfs and being woken from a deathless slumber by a pesky prince. She's joined by three other fantastic guests. Cinderella, a dear friend of mine who found her fortune through a very well-fitting glass slipper. Belle, best known for her love of books and hairy men. And of course, Princess Jasmine, or as I should say, Sultan Jasmine, the new ruler of Agrabah, alongside her husband Prince Aladdin. But before we begin, I'd just like to say a quick thank you to our sponsor this week, Pumpkin Carriages Limited, getting you to where you need to be whenever you need them. Terms and conditions apply. Service only operates before midnight. Now, on with the podcast. Welcome everyone. I'm your host, Fairy Godmother. I'm sure you've all met, but just in case you haven't, may I introduce Belle?
Hiya.
Snow White.
Hello.
Jasmine.
Hi.
And of course, Cinderella. Oh, Cinders is fine. And congratulations on becoming Sultan, Jasmine.
Hardly. It wasn't exactly an optional promotion.
Well, this actually brings us nicely to my first question, which is, what have you been getting up to since we last saw you?
Life hasn't exactly been easy. I mean, relatively speaking, I do own an entire country, but since Father's passing, I found myself rather unsupportive.
Aladdin,
He tries. He really does, but
don't make excuses for him.
I'm not. That's the truth. He tries. Unfortunately, he has the emotional maturity of a 12-year-old, so his attempts are somewhat limited. I blame the monkey, quite honestly. You must know what I mean, Belle, considering you are pretty much married to one.
Well, you're right about that one.
It has been interesting, and there has been a definite change of dynamic, that's for sure.
Speaking of changes in dynamic, how have you been finding single life, Snow White? Snow White? Snow?
Oh, well, I've been doing many things. I moved back in with the dwarfs. I thought it best that the prince get the castle.
Yeah, what's happened to him? He hasn't made any public appearances with you for a while.
We don't tend to talk much since the divorce.
Well, I was talking to Sleeping Beauty the other day and she hasn't seen him either.
I don't want to talk about Sleeping Beauty.
Drop it, Belle.
He has just been indisposed as of late.
Really? 'Cause I heard different.
What kind of different?
Well, I heard on the grapevine that you were the last person to see him, that you went apple picking and he hasn't been seen since.
Well,
Now, come on, that's a bit overdramatic, isn't it? I think you should lay off the Cluedo, Inspector Bell.
I don't even like board games.
All right then. Belle, same question.
Well, now I'm a teacher in the local school, teaching people about who and who not to talk to.
That is truly amazing, Belle.
Yeah, well, after the fire in the library, I felt a change of scenery was appropriate.
How have things been since then?
Adam and I don't see each other much. I definitely wasn't cut out for the life of a princess.
Of course you are. You're the most equipped at being a princess out of all of us. He just wasn't treating you like one. You aren't responsible for his misdeeds. Cinderella, my child, what about you? Well, I took your advice, and with everyone's help, I started my own fashion line, Midnight Couture.
Ooh.
cool.
Oh, how exciting for you. So I guess you're more of a business owner than a princess now. I guess you could say that. Of course, that's not what the storybooks will say. Is there anything you'd have liked the storybooks to have mentioned? Or anything you'd have liked them to miss out? Well, of course, there are so many versions of my story. My main regret is that so many people only know about the clean-cut version. People think I'm this prim and proper lady and that I'd never hurt a fly, when actually, to the surprise of a lot of people, I have a backbone.
I know. I can't tell you how many people think that I don't have a mind of my own.
You won't hear this from the mainstream media, but guess what happened to my sisters after Prince Charming found me?
I'm not sure if you should be broadcasting.
Their eyes were pecked out by pigeons. Blinded for life. And you know what? No one's messed with me since.
Isn't that a bit extreme?
I'd say that was a just punishment. Good for you.
Is that the kind of message you want to be sending out into the world? The message that good things come to those who wait and that bad things come to those who terrorise a grieving daughter? Yes, I think it is.
Violence is never the answer.
It bloody works, though.
I do not wish to be loved through fear.
I don't regret what happened. And besides, whether they love me or not is irrelevant. They're out of my life, and that's the important part.
You were lucky to be able to leave them. A new start.
Of course you've had a new start yourself, Belle.
Of sorts. The school's been a fantastic escape for me. It's been great to be able to help my community properly, having been an outsider for so long.
Do you regret staying so secluded before you met the beast?
He goes by Adam now. But yes, I do. The stories will tell you that my family kept to themselves and that I had my nose stuck in a book. I didn't feel welcome. But on the other hand, all anyone ever cared about was how I looked.
Your name literally means beauty.
Precisely. I didn't have a chance. So it felt pointless trying to engage with anyone outside my family. Also, the stories will tell you that I made choices throughout my story and that I was able to shape my destiny. They couldn't be more wrong. I didn't choose to replace my dad in the tower. He made a deal with Adam, trading me in to become his fiancée in exchange for his freedom. And don't even get me started on Stockholm Syndrome.
Yes, well, that would be an entire podcast in itself.
Psychological manipulation at its finest.
And do you have any major regrets with how your story was told?
Well, people often think that the worst part of my story was having to clean up after 7 men. And to be fair, that was pretty bad. But that's trivial in comparison to what I was really going through. Do you know how old I was when a huntsman took me into the forest and nearly killed me?
14, wasn't it?
Ha! I wish. I was in fact just 7 years old.
That is...
Problematic? Yup. I worked for the dwarves for about 10 years before my stepmother came back to kill me. And I say work because they didn't let me live with them out of pity, but in exchange for being their housemaid from about the age of 7.
That sounds horrible.
Well, you get on with it, don't you? And I'm here now, alive and breathing and as stable as I can be. I just hope that I don't get blessed with any more surprises.
The life of a princess is not for the faint of heart, it seems. Surprises around every corner. And what surprised you most about royal life, Jasmine?
There was a definite shock moving from princess to head of the family. I didn't realise how much work there needed to be done. My father had left the country in quite a state. It's taken us years to get back on the good side of the public.
Me, on the other hand, ever since I got married, there hasn't been much of a difference. So, I don't know about you guys, but no, I'm good. I didn't even get round to asking you, but thank you anyway. So, Belle, what about you?
Well, I thought I was going to be happy, but really, it just got very repetitive very quickly.
Oh, come on, I'm sure it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be as bad as me.
Well, me, on the other hand, I didn't really take a fancy to it at first. Everyone was after me for no reason, and it all got a bit too much. But now I can be free to do what I want without being caught.
Time for a quick break. I'd just like to take a moment to remind all of our listeners that beauty spindles are now half price for a limited time. Available at beautyspindles.com. Just enter the code PRICKSFORUS at checkout. Now, back to the podcast. Now, they've come up in conversation a bit, but I was wondering if we could dig a little deeper into what it's like with your princes. Anything you'd change if you could?
Well, considering half of us don't live with our princes anymore, that should say enough.
It's less about changing who they are, because that's impossible, but perhaps changing our expectations?
Exactly. I mean, what did I expect? Marrying a man who goes around kissing sleeping girls. Hardly an admirable quality.
Or marrying a man who was literally obese for most of his life and thought that imprisoning someone for taking a flower from his garden was reasonable. These princes come with so many red flags, but when you're so incredibly desperate...
Or unconscious.
It's not as if you have a choice.
Of course, that doesn't mean all princes are going to be like that.
Charming didn't even recognise you without makeup.
He knew you from your feet.
Each to their own.
What I mean is that it's not all doom and gloom, and you shouldn't try to change who a person is. Right, Jasmine?
Whatever I say about Aladdin, I do have to agree with Cinders. She is right. I knew who I was marrying, and I stand by him. Till death do us part and all that. He's a crazy monkey man hybrid, but he's my crazy monkey man hybrid.
What an unconventional compliment. I'm afraid, ladies, that we're nearing the end of our time here, so I will ask you one final question. What advice would you give to any budding young princesses?
Don't become a princess.
I would have to agree.
Or if you really do insist on pursuing this life, then make sure that the people joining you have your best interests at heart. It's not about the journey or the destination. It's about who you go there with.
That was very sweet, Snow. Good to know that there is a soft side to you.
Yeah, don't get used to it.
I have been lucky with my prince. Despite the in-laws trying to sabotage us at every turn, we were able to keep ourselves afloat. He protected me and I protected him. We were a team. So my advice is to find yourself a team. I spent so long having to fight my own corner that I was under the impression that I didn't need anybody else and that I never would. If it wasn't for Fairy Godmother over there, I'd still be sweeping up the old cinders round the fireplace.
Some of us aren't lucky enough to have a fairy godmother.
Or a genie.
Of course, I was very lucky. But Fairy Godmother gave me something far more important than a pumpkin carriage and glass slippers. She gave me hope. She opened my eyes to what my life could be if I let people in. Oh, you flatter me. And while we're on the topic of my fairy godmothering, if any of our listeners find themselves in times of trouble, then please reach out to my free advice service, Waving Wands. We can offer legal advice, monetary advice, fashion advice, you name it, and we can help. To contact us, simply wish on a shooting star, available at all good retailers. Now, where was I? Ah, yes, Cinderella and me saving a life. Any other thoughts on that, anyone? Well, I wish I'd known you all back then. Would have been nice to have some like-minded people around. But yes, my main advice would be to find your team and be open to change.
I was going to mention change. I always thought I was ready for change. I craved it every day of my life. I knew I was destined for something more, something greater, and when I received what I'd always dreamed of, it was cracked and distorted. It wasn't perfect.
Perfection is a killer.
Yeah, and once I realised that what I had built up in my expectations wasn't going to be my reality, I knew that I needed to take action. I made a change for the better, a change on my terms, and, well, the rest is history. So to summarise, I guess my advice would be that change can be good. Embrace it, give it your all, but if it doesn't work out, that's okay too. We're always learning. Sorry, I know that sounds very teachery of me, but learning is vital.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to admit when you don't know something. Being a sultan, well, being in charge of anything. A country, a business, your own destiny, it is really hard. And you aren't going to get anywhere by just pretending you know what you're doing. Ask for help.
Don't just ask anyone, though.
Of course not. Gosh, the last time I asked Aladdin for some advice, he suggested replacing all of the gold we had with bananas. Can't help but think the monkey had something to do with that one.
Any final thoughts, Snow?
Well, I think all of you have been very diplomatic with your answers. Have a team, make change, ask for help. My honest advice would be to call a spade a spade. If they're being arseholes, then tell them to piss off. I haven't got time to mess around with princes who kiss other sleeping women or listen to monkeys more than they do their own wives. Sure, being friendly is useful and should always be the first port of call, but Get rid of the time wasters.
Amen to that.
Well, those are some strong closing statements there, and I wouldn't say I wholly disagree. I think that's the end of our time here, ladies. Thank you to everyone who's listened. I hope you've gained some insight into the lives of the lovely 4 women in front of me, and perhaps there's been a lesson or 2 to learn.
Oh, you sound like Belle.
Oh, indeed I do. You're rubbing off on me. Thank you for listening, everyone. We'll see you on next month's episode of the Princess Power Podcast.